August 6, 1945. 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima, Japan. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was walking to his office when the sky exploded into white light. The heat was so intense it felt like someone had opened the door to hell itself. He was thrown through the air like a rag doll, his skin burning, his eardrums shattered. But he survived. 3 days later, on August 9th, he was sitting in his office in Nagasaki, trying to explain to his boss what he had witnessed in Hiroshima. His boss didn't believe him. "One bomb cannot destroy an entire city," the man said dismissively. At that exact moment, the room filled with the same blinding white light. It was happening again. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is the only person in human history officially recognized to have survived both atomic bomb attacks. This is not just a story of survival. This is a story of unimaginable odds, of fate, of a man who looked death in the face twice, and somehow, impossibly, lived to tell the tale. What happened in those 9 days between the bombs? How did one man survive the unsurvivable, not once, but twice? And what did witnessing humanity's most destructive weapon, 2 times, do to a man's soul? This is that story. And I promise you, by the end, you'll question everything you thought you knew about fate, luck, and the thin line between life and death. To understand this story, you need to understand who Tsutomu Yamaguchi was before the world changed forever. Born in 1916 in Nagasaki, Tsutomu was a naval engineer working for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a general. He was just a regular guy, doing his job, trying to support his wife Hisako and their young son Katsutoshi. In the summer of 1945, Tsutomu was 29 years old. He had been assigned to a 3-month business trip to Hiroshima, about 180 miles from his home in Nagasaki. His job was to help design oil tankers for the Japanese Navy. By August, the war was clearly going badly for Japan. American bombers had been devastating Japanese cities for months. Tokyo had been firebombed in March, killing over 100,000 people in a single night. Everyone knew the end was coming. But no one, absolutely no one, could have imagined what was about to happen. August 6th was supposed to be Tsutomu's last day in Hiroshima. His work assignment was complete. He had packed his bags. He was planning to take the train home to Nagasaki that evening to reunite with his wife and son. He woke up early that morning, around 7 a.m. The weather was beautiful, clear skies, warm summer air. He had breakfast at his lodging, gathered his things, and realized he had forgotten his personal seal, his hanko, back at the Mitsubishi shipyard office. In Japanese culture, your hanko is crucial for official documents. Without it, he couldn't properly check out of his assignment. So Tsutomu made a decision that would change his life forever. He decided to go back to the office one more time. If he had just left without it, if he had just said, "Forget the hanko," he would have been on a train, far from Hiroshima, when it happened. But fate had other plans. 8:15 a.m. Tsutomu was walking through the Mitsubishi shipyard, about 2 miles from the city center. It was a normal morning. Workers were arriving, starting their shifts. The air raid sirens that had become routine in Japanese cities were silent. High above, invisible in the morning sun, a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay was approaching at 31,000 feet. In its bomb bay was a weapon that had never been used in war before. A weapon that would change human history forever. The bomb was called Little Boy. It contained 141 pounds of uranium-235. When it detonated, it would release energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. At exactly 8:15 a.m. and 17 seconds, Little Boy fell from the Enola Gay. 43 seconds later, at 1,968 feet above Hiroshima, it detonated. Tsutomu saw it happen. He was looking up at the sky when a plane flew overhead, and he saw something drop from it. Then the world turned white. He described it later as if someone had taken a photograph with a giant flash, but the flash never ended. The light was so bright it seemed to erase reality itself. For a moment, there was nothing but pure, searing whiteness. Then came the heat. The temperature at the bomb's hypocenter reached over 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Even 2 miles away where Tsutomu stood, the thermal radiation was intense enough to cause severe burns. He felt his left side burning, the exposed skin on his face and arms blistering instantly. Then came the blast wave. Traveling at over 600 miles per hour, the shock wave hit him like an invisible freight train. He was lifted off his feet and thrown through the air. He tumbled, unable to control his body, unable to breathe, unable to think. He landed hard in a ditch, his body broken, his skin burned, his ears ringing so loud he couldn't hear anything else. Blood ran down his face. His left arm hung uselessly at his side. For several minutes, maybe longer, he just lay there. He couldn't move. He couldn't process what had happened. His mind couldn't accept the reality of what he had just experienced. Slowly, agonizingly, he pulled himself up. He looked toward Hiroshima. The city was gone. Where there had been buildings, homes, temples, schools, there was now a mushroom-shaped cloud rising into the sky, black and terrible and impossibly huge. Fires burned everywhere. The air was thick with smoke and dust and the smell of burning. And the sound, oh God, the sound. Thousands of voices screaming, crying, calling for help, calling for family members who would never answer. Tsutomu started walking. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to move. He had to survive. He had to get home to his family. His left arm was badly burned, hanging limp. His face was burned. His hearing was damaged, but his legs still worked. So he walked. He walked through hell. Bodies were everywhere. Some were charred beyond recognition. Some were still moving, crying out for water, for help, for death. Buildings were collapsed. Fires raged out of control. The river was full of corpses. People stumbled past him like zombies, their skin hanging off in sheets, their eyes blank with shock. A woman carried a dead baby, refusing to believe her child was gone. A man sat in the ruins of his home, laughing hysterically at nothing. Tsutomu kept walking, through the fires, through the ruins, through the dead and the dying. He walked for hours. He finally reached the train station. Somehow, impossibly, trains were still running, evacuating survivors. He got on a train. He doesn't remember much about the journey. He was in shock, drifting in and out of consciousness. But he knew where he had to go. Home, to Nagasaki, to his wife and son, to safety. He had survived the unsurvivable. He had looked into the face of humanity's most terrible weapon and lived. It was over, or so he thought. The train journey from Hiroshima to Nagasaki normally took about 6 hours. But nothing was normal anymore. The train was packed with burned, bleeding, dying survivors. There were no doctors, no medical supplies, just hundreds of people in agony, trying to get somewhere, anywhere, away from the nightmare. Tsutomu sat by a window, watching the countryside pass by. His burns throbbed. His arm felt like it was still on fire, but he was alive. He kept telling himself that, "I'm alive. I'm going home. I survived." Other passengers tried to talk about what had happened. Wild theories spread through the train car. Some said it was a new type of bomb. Some said the Americans had somehow captured the power of the sun. Some said it was divine punishment for Japan's sins. No one knew the truth. No one could comprehend what they had witnessed. The train arrived in Nagasaki late that night, August 6th. Tsutomu stumbled off the train and made his way home. When Hisako opened the door and saw her husband burned and bleeding, she screamed. She helped him inside, cleaned his wounds as best she could with the limited supplies they had. His burns were severe. The left side of his face was blistered and raw. His left arm was badly damaged. His hearing was impaired. He was suffering from radiation exposure, though no one knew what that meant yet. But he was home. He was alive. That was what mattered. For the next 2 days, Tsutomu rested. He tried to recover. He told Hisako everything he had seen, though words felt inadequate to describe it. How do you explain the end of the world? How do you describe seeing 80,000 people die in an instant? On August 8th, Tsutomu felt well enough to go to work. His bosses at Mitsubishi and Nagasaki needed to know what had happened to the Hiroshima office. Despite his injuries, despite the trauma, he got up and went to the office. It was a decision that would once again place him in the path of history's most destructive force. August 9th, 1945. 11 a.m. Tsutomu was sitting in his supervisor's office, bandages covering his burns. He was trying to explain what he had seen in Hiroshima. The destruction, the flash, the heat, the bomb that destroyed an entire city in seconds. His supervisor listened with skepticism. The man shook his head. "You must be exaggerating," he said. "One bomb cannot destroy an entire city. It's impossible. You were in shock. You didn't see what you think you saw." Tsutomu was getting frustrated. He had been there. He had seen it with his own eyes. He started to argue, to insist that he was telling the truth. And then, at 11:02 a.m., the room filled with light. Not again. Please God, not again. The bomb that fell on Nagasaki was called Fat Man. It was more powerful than Little Boy, containing plutonium instead of uranium. It exploded at 1,650 feet above the city with a force equivalent to 21,000 tons of TNT. Tsutomu was approximately 1.8 miles from the hypocenter. Again. For the second time in 3 days, he experienced the blinding white flash, the searing heat, the crushing blast wave that felt like the hand of an angry god. But this time was different. This time, he knew what was happening. In the fraction of a second between seeing the light and feeling the blast, his brain processed what was occurring. It's the same. It's happening again. Another bomb. Another atomic bomb. The blast wave hit the building. Windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. The walls buckled. The ceiling cracked. Tsutomu and his co-workers were thrown to the floor like toys. But Tsutomu had learned from Hiroshima. The moment he saw the flash, he had thrown himself behind a desk, covering his head. The other men in the office, who didn't understand what was happening, were caught standing, exposed. The building didn't collapse, but it was devastated. When the shaking stopped, when the roar of the blast wave passed, Tsutomu pulled himself up. He was alive. Again. His ears were ringing. Again. His body ached from being thrown to the ground. But his burns from Hiroshima had protected him. The bandages had shielded his already damaged skin from new burns. He looked around. His co-workers were injured but alive. The supervisor who had just told him one bomb couldn't destroy a city now stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. "You were right," the man whispered. "God help us, you were right." Tsutomu stumbled out of the building. The scene was horrifyingly familiar, the mushroom cloud rising over the city, the fires spreading, the screams, the smoke, the smell of death. But this time, it was his home. This time, it was the city where his wife and son lived. Panic seized him. Hisako, Katsutoshi, where were they? Were they alive? He started running, or trying to. His injured body protested, but he didn't care. He had to find his family. He had to know they survived. The streets were chaos. People ran in every direction. Buildings burned. The injured stumbled through the smoke, calling for loved ones. It was Hiroshima all over again, but worse, because this time it was personal. Tsutomu ran through the burning city. His lungs burned from the smoke. His injuries screamed in protest. But he kept moving. Hisako, Katsutoshi, please be alive, please. He reached his neighborhood. Many houses were damaged or destroyed, but some were still standing. He rounded the corner to his street, his heart pounding. And there, standing in front of their house, were his wife and son. They were alive. Hisako saw him and ran to him. They held each other crying, unable to believe they had all survived. Their house was damaged but standing. They were injured but alive. Tsutomu Yamaguchi had done the impossible. He had survived 2 atomic bombs in 3 days. The odds of being in Hiroshima when the first bomb dropped were about 1 in 300,000. The odds of being in Nagasaki when the second bomb dropped were similar. The odds of being in both cities when both bombs dropped? Astronomically, impossibly small. Yet here he was, burned, battered, traumatized, but alive. The physical recovery took months. Tsutomu's burns healed slowly, leaving scars that he would carry for the rest of his life. His hearing never fully recovered. He suffered from radiation sickness, nausea, weakness, hair loss. But the psychological scars went even deeper. How do you process surviving something that killed hundreds of thousands of people? How do you live with the knowledge that you witnessed humanity's most terrible weapon, not once, but twice? How do you explain to people that you were there, both times, and lived? For years, Tsutomu didn't talk about it. The trauma was too deep, the memories too painful. Japan itself didn't want to discuss the bombs. The nation was trying to rebuild, to move forward, to forget the horrors of the war. But Tsutomu couldn't forget. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash. He heard the screams. He smelled the burning flesh. The bombs had ended the war, but for survivors like him, the war never really ended. He went back to work at Mitsubishi. He raised his family. His son Katsutoshi grew up healthy, despite the radiation exposure. Tsutomu and Hisako eventually had 2 daughters as well. Life went on. But in 1957, 12 years after the bombs, Tsutomu started experiencing health problems. Cancer. The radiation had done its work. He battled it and survived, but more cancers would come throughout his life. Still, he remained silent about his experience. It wasn't until the 1980s, when he was in his 60s, that Tsutomu finally began speaking publicly about what had happened to him. He became an advocate for nuclear disarmament. He spoke at schools, at peace conferences, at the United Nations. He wrote a memoir. He wanted the world to understand what nuclear weapons really meant, not in abstract terms of megatons and military strategy, but in human terms. In 2009, at age 93, Tsutomu was officially recognized by the Japanese government as a Niju Hibakusha, a double bomb survivor. He was the only person in history to receive this designation. He used this recognition to amplify his message. In one of his final interviews, he said, "I experienced the atomic bombs 3 days apart. I thought the mushroom cloud had chased me from Hiroshima to Nagasaki. I can't understand why the world cannot understand the agony of the nuclear bombs. How can they keep developing these weapons?" On January 4, 2010, Tsutomu Yamaguchi died of stomach cancer at the age of 93. He had lived 65 years after the bombs. 65 years of carrying the weight of what he had witnessed. 65 years of survivor's guilt, of asking why he lived when so many died. But he also lived 65 years with his family. He saw his children grow up. He met his grandchildren. He helped ensure the world would never forget what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His wife Hisako lived until 2008. His son Katsutoshi became a successful architect. Despite the radiation exposure, despite the trauma, the Yamaguchi family survived and thrived. So what do we take from this story? What does it mean that one man survived both atomic bombs? Some people called Tsutomu the unluckiest man in the world. After all, what are the odds of being in both cities when both bombs fell? but others called him the luckiest man in the world. Because despite those impossible odds, despite witnessing the most destructive force humanity has ever unleashed, not once but twice, he survived. He lived. He had a family. He had a purpose. Maybe luck has nothing to do with it. Maybe Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived because he was meant to survive. Because someone needed to witness both bombs and live to tell the story. Because the world needed to understand, not just through statistics and history books, but through the testimony of someone who was there, who saw it, who felt it, who lived it. On August 6th and August 9th, 1945, approximately 200,000 people died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was in both cities. By all logic, by all probability, he should have died too. But he didn't. He survived to tell us that nuclear weapons are not abstract military assets. They are horror made real. They are the end of the world made manifest. They are something humanity must never, ever use again. That was his message. That was his purpose. That was why he survived. Tsutomu Yamaguchi looked into the sun twice and lived to tell us what he saw. We owe it to him and to the hundreds of thousands who didn't survive to never forget.